Elementary Algebra Final Assessment 1 Review Questions 12 through 15 Outcome 4 Applications. In this section, you'll be asked to write fractions in lowest terms. Question 12 reads, there are 16 ounces to a pound. What fraction of a pound is 12 ounces? When looking at a fraction represents some part over a whole. In this case, our whole would be 1 pound, equaling 16 ounces. So we'll place this into the bottom or the denominator's position. Our part is 12 ounces. This goes into the top position or numerator's position. We now have 12/16. We're not quite complete though. We need to move this number into lowest terms. We can do this by breaking it down into prime numbers and then canceling, or we can look for a number that will divide evenly into both the top and bottom, or into the numerator and denominator. If we look at the numbers 12 and 16, we can see that a 4 will divide evenly into both numbers. When we do this, we get a 4 divided into 12 to equal 3, and a 4 into 16 to equal 4. This creates an equivalent fraction, 3/4. An equivalent fraction is a fraction that is equal to the original, 12/16 in this case. Now, if you weren't aware that a 4 would divide into both a 12 and a 16, you could start with smaller steps. For example, looking at the two numbers 12 and 16, they're both even. This means the number 2 would divide into both. You could start with the 2. A 2 into 12 would create a 6. A 2 into a 16 would create an 8. In looking at the new equivalent fraction, we see 6/8. We see that both numbers are even again. So we could go ahead and proceed by dividing by a 2 again to reduce. This results in our 3/4. There's no longer any number that will divide both into the 3 and the 4 evenly other than 1. So it is our final answer. Moving on, we're going to follow the same set of instructions. We're going to write a fraction in lowest terms. In number 13, it reads, a survey is conducted in front of a department store. The person conducting the survey asked 212 women if they used a cosmetic product, and 24 responded that they do use the product. What is the lowest terms fraction of the women surveyed that said they used the product? So in this case, we're going to follow the same procedure. We have a part over the whole. The whole in this case is the 212 original women that were surveyed. This goes into the denominator's position, the bottom position. The part that said they did use the product was 24, so this goes into the numerator's position, or the top. Again, we want to reduce this fraction by looking for a number that would divide into both the top and the bottom evenly. These are even numbers, so we could start by dividing by a 2 again. Divide by a 2, divide by a 2. 24 divided by 2 results in 12. 212 divided by 2 results in 106. These are still even, so we could divide by 2 again. 2 into 12 results in 6. 2 into 106 results in 53. If we look at these two numbers, 6 and 53, the only number that would go into the 6 would be a 2 a 3, and a 6. So we want to see if any of those numbers would go into 53 evenly. A 2 will not. The number is odd. 3 we know won't go in either. There's a trick for 3. If you add or sum the numbers together and the smaller number is divisible by 3, the larger number is divisible by 3. This means take the 5 and the 3. A 5 plus a 3 gets you 8. 8 is not divisible by 3, therefore 53 is not divisible by 3. Lastly, 6. 6 will also not divide into 53 evenly. So we have found our final answer, 6/53. If we look back here, we see that we divided the 2 in twice. This means that 24 and 212 were divisible by 4. If you'd seen the 4 to begin with, you could have started with the 4 and had one less step, but there's nothing wrong with starting with smaller steps. Moving on. Number 14, it says simply to solve. So let's read the problem and solve it out. It says Jimmy put $800 down on a new sports car. He made 59 payments of $259 and spent $571 in maintenance and repairs. 3 years after paying off the car, he sells it for $4,810. What is his net? Is it profit or loss? So we want to go back and pull all the information from the problem and write it into an equation. Anything that he paid out of pocket would be a negative value. Anything that he was given or was paid directly to him would be a positive value. So reading out, the first one we see is that Jimmy put down $800. This means he paid out $800, making this 800 a negative number. We move on. He made 59 payments of $259. That would also be a negative value. So we're going to sum to our first value this second, negative 259. But it's not just a single payment of 259, it's 59 payments of 259. So we're going to multiply that number by 59. Moving on, we're going to see that he also spent $571 in repairs. Again, another negative number, negative 571. 3 years later, after paying off the car, he sold it for $4,810. This was a value that was paid to him, so it will be a positive value, so plus $4,810. We're going to proceed by simplifying the number. We have, as we read across, one multiplication that we need to simplify before we can start adding or subtracting. We see that negative 259 times 59. So let's complete that. A negative 259 times 59 comes out to a negative 15,281. We can now carry down everything else in the problem. We have a minus 800 plus that negative 15,281 plus a negative 571 plus 4,810. If it makes it easier, you can place parentheses around your negative numbers to show those negatives are being held to the original numbers. Let's move on. Going left to right, let's start summing. We have a negative 800 plus a negative 15,281 to create a negative 16,081. Let's carry down now that plus negative 571 and that plus 4,810. Now let's sum the next two numbers. Negative 16,081 plus negative 571 results in a negative 16,652. Carry down the plus 4,810. Let's sum these last two numbers together. We have a negative to a positive. This means we'll subtract the two numbers and keep the sign of the larger. In this case, the sign is negative. So we're going to take 16,652 and subtract 4,810 to get a negative 11,842. The negative indicates that we have a loss on our net. So our net in this case is going to be a negative $11,842. You notice that I've included the dollar sign now. The dollar sign is part of the unit and needs to be in the final answer. We've answered one part of the question, what is his net? Now it asks, is it a profit or a loss? A negative sign indicates a loss. This completes the question. Moving on to question number 15. It asks, Stefan can exempt his math exam if he has a test average greater than or equal to a 70 on the 5 tests in the course. His current test scores are 78, 48, 78, 97. Using trial and error, determine the minimum score on the last that will give him an average. Let's start with what is an average. An average, or to calculate an average, you're going to sum all the values or all the numbers together and then divide by however many were in the original set. In this case, it's going to be 5 tests, but we only have 4 to start with. So let's start this. We're going to add those 4 together. We have 78 plus 48 plus 78 plus 97 plus one additional test that we don't have a score on yet. When we don't know a number, we use a variable. So in this case, I'm going to use the letter x as our variable, and we divide that by 5. We know one other piece of information, what we want this to equal to. We want it to equal to 70. So now we can go down and solve this problem and solve for x to find out what the minimum average he can acquire on that test to keep a 70 in the course. So let's simplify first. We can simplify by summing the numbers in the top of the fraction. We have 78 plus 48 plus 78 plus 97 to get 301 plus x divided by a 5 equals 70. Now we want to continue to solve for x. We want x on its own. Let's start by moving that 5 out. Currently that 5 is dividing. The opposite of divide is going to be to multiply. So we'll multiply both sides of this problem by a 5. This will allow us to clear the 5 from the left side, leaving us with 301 plus x. Simplify 70 times 5 to get 350. Now we want to move this 301 to the other side, leaving x alone. We do this by subtracting 301. Currently it's being summed, so the opposite is to subtract. Whatever we do to one side, again, we do to the other side. It's just like a balance, we want to keep it even on both sides of the equal sign. When we come down, this comes to a 0 plus x is equal to a 49. So our x is equal to 49.